Welcome to i24NEWS National Security Podcast in partnership with INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies. I'm your host, Nicole Zedek. Each week, we're going to have an in-depth discussion with expert analysts on some of the most pressing national security challenges facing Israel today. So, let's get started. Now, this week, we're talking about one of Israel's so-called allies, Turkey. Since the beginning of the war in Gaza, Turkey's aggressive rhetoric towards Israel has caused some seriously strained relations between the two states, which only formally restored ties back in 2022. Now, while some of the actions, like canceling joint events or recalling its ambassador, these were seen as pretty manageable for Israel. But more recent steps taken by Ankara have been drastic, including a decision in May to completely halt trade with the Jewish state. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has threatened to invade Israel in support of the Palestinian cause, and even compared Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to Hitler. Now, in response, Foreign Minister Israel Katz compared Erdogan to former Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein, also hinting at Hussein's demise. So, are Israel and Turkey relations on a path towards demise? What does this all mean for the future of the two countries that already have a complicated history? And even broader, what does it mean for Turkey's place in the global and regional balance of power? Well, to answer all of these questions and more, I have the privilege of hosting Dr. Gallia Lindenstrauss, senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies and Tel Aviv University, a specialist in Turkish foreign policy. Dr. Lindenstrauss, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, before we can dig into exactly where we are today, I want to start with a history of where we got here. I mean, back in 1949, Turkey was the first Muslim-majority country to even formally recognize the State of Israel. From there, we had decades of pretty positive relations, but then flash forward to the early 2000s, the AK party's rise to power, Erdogan specifically, these ties have been turbulent ever since.
So today we talk about normalization possibly between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and of course the Abraham Accords. But the first country, as you mentioned, to normalize relations with Israel was Turkey, when it recognized Israel in 1949. And at the beginning, the relations were more in the backstage, although the founding father of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, initiated the Peripheral Pact, which was basically we had problems with our Arab neighbors, so we reached out to Muslim countries in the second tier. And among these were Iran, Turkey, Ethiopia, and the Kurds also. The beginning of Israel's relations with the Kurdish minorities is that period. So most of the Cold War, the relations are behind the scenes. It takes the Oslo Accords in the 1990s to make the relations become public. And once they become public, they flourish. It's really a boom in the relations. A lot of agreements are signed, both in the military sphere, but also in trade, in tourism, and the relations with the honeymoon period in the 1990s. So when Erdogan comes to power in the early 2000s, he receives Israel-Turkish relations in top state. And at the beginning, he doesn't meddle with them. At the beginning, he leaves it because it's also something that the Turkish army emphasizes, so he doesn't touch it in the beginning and even visits Israel in 2005. But once he is more secure in power, things begin to deteriorate. We see the Davos incident in which he insults the Israel President Shimon Peres, and later, of course, the Mavi Marmara, in which there was a direct confrontation between the IDF and Turkish citizens. But things also are repaired. We have two normalization periods in 2016 and later in 2018. But both these normalizations hold less than 2 years. So the 2016 breaks in 2018, and then the 2018 breaks, 2022. We have another normalization, and this one breaks with the war in Gaza.
Well, that brings us kind of up to date now. So you mentioned October 7th, these ties that were formally restored with the help of the United States, which wanted to see these ties between Israel and Turkey restored for years. 2022, that finally happened, but it was very short-lived because, as you mentioned, October 7th happens, and Erdogan has yet to even explicitly condemn the attack by Hamas. It goes a step forward to even backing Hamas leaders, and only condemning Israel's military actions since then. So what has this shift been since October 7th?
Well, we saw in previous instances in which there was a flare-up between Israel and the Palestinians that this also affected Turkish-Israeli relations. So this was not a surprise in itself. But it's true that Erdogan went one step further than other Muslim majority leaders. Basically, with Turkey, it's the only country in which we have diplomatic relations with that has now a complete trade ban on us. There are countries, of course, that don't trade with us because we don't have diplomatic relations with them. But this is unprecedented. The two countries that have a free trade agreement that was signed in these 1990s honeymoon period. Two countries that have a free trade agreement decide overnight, or one side decides overnight to stop trade completely. And I would say that after October 7th, there were 2 weeks in which Erdogan was a little bit more muted. But once Israel began to operate in Gaza seriously, then all hell broke loose. His statements became much more fierce against Israel, but it didn't stop its statement, because in the past we also witnessed sharp rhetoric by Erdogan, but here it went to the trade ban. It also went to Turkey joining South Africa in the case against Israel in the International Court of Justice. It went that Turkish media, that mostly is state-held media or state-sponsored media, is very much not only advancing the Palestinian narrative, but specifically advancing the Hamas narrative on the conflict. And worse than that, I would say that Erdogan says that basically Israel also targets Turkey, that it's not going to stop with Israel's supposedly aggression against Gaza, but that Israel has expansionist policies, and these are also targeted to Turkey. Hence, defending Hamas is also defending Turkey, which is something we didn't hear in the past.
Well, and then we've also seen Erdogan taking that threat one step further, threatening to even invade Israel in support of the Palestinian cause. Is this all talk, though, or could a military invasion, military clash between Israel and Turkey, is that somewhere in the possibility of the future?
So luckily, he didn't use the word invade. He said that, like in other instances, perhaps there would be an...
alluding to it, perhaps.
Alluding to it, yes. He talked about Libya. He talked about Karabakh in Azerbaijan. So the word invasion, luckily, is not there yet. But yes, he did refer to military action. And I think we should take him seriously. Of course, Turkey's a NATO member. Yeah. It's not going to be something trivial, and Turkey has its other problems, and Israel is not first on its agenda, despite Erdogan's rhetoric. But we did see tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean in previous years between Turkey and Greece, and I think we shouldn't rule out that things might deteriorate also in the military sphere.
Certainly be prepared for anything, but it seems the main deterioration right now is in trade and economics. You mentioned this complete halt on trade coming pretty much overnight from Turkey. Before this, Turkey had been among the 5 largest exporters to Israel. We're talking about $7 billion roughly here of trade. This is not a small amount. And so what are the implications of something like this?
Yes, 2022 was a record high year. People even talk about $8 billion mutual trades, and Turkish figures even talk about $10 billion mutual trade, and that's significant. And I have to say that from this trade, Turkey enjoyed more than Israel, because 3/4 of this trade was Turkish exports to Israel, and only 1/4 was Israeli exports to Turkey. This halt has been, yes, direct ship trade has been halted. There is some trade going through third parties. There's been reports of trade going through Greece, for example. And also Turkey is also a very important trade partner of the Palestinians. So some trade there has been a huge increase in trade between Turkey and the Palestinians, like 1,000% increase. And this increase can only be explained that this is later resold to Israel. But still, even with all this third-party trade, still the numbers are meager compared to where we were before. It's not only trade, by the way, it's also Turkish Airlines. It used to be a very popular airline flying out from Tel Aviv, and Istanbul was a very popular hub for Israelis flying abroad. But today we see that Fly Dubai, for example, is operating 8 flights to Tel Aviv, and that Dubai has become this hub, at least for Israelis going to the east.
When we heard that Erdogan announced this, he did say it is a halt. It's not a complete embargo quite yet, because he says that we want to halt trade with Israel until there is a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. So does that leave room for then going back to the previous trade routes, or could this even push to a full embargo in the future? Is this something that Erdogan wants to see, and this is just an excuse in the meantime?
No, I think he does want a temporary halt in trade. And he talked about two conditions. Basically, one, as you mentioned, a ceasefire. And I think he thought ceasefire was closer than what occurred in reality. And another thing, he wanted that Turkish aid would enter freely into Gaza. We know that a lot of Turkish aid does enter to Gaza through Egypt, but they also wanted some aid to be dropped by air, like, for example, UAE, Jordan dropped. And this was something that Israel, because of its suspicion of Turkey, and because Turkey became a hub, a base for Hamas operatives in recent years, I think Israel was more suspicious of Turkish aid and did not allow these airdrops of Turkey to happen. So this is the Turkish conditions, but I have to say business people, they're practical people. They like to buy from Turkey. Turkey has good products and good value. But business people, as long as the trade embargo continues, then business people look to other places and they might find alternatives. And hence, I think Turkey burned a bridge here of the business people, that they're looking to other places, and if they'll find a good alternative, they won't go back to Turkey. They won't try this again. And I think that's very dangerous because Turkey-Israeli diplomatic relations didn't have much left beyond trade in recent years. We didn't have the military component we had in the past. We didn't have Turkish mediation because the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians was stuck. We had a lot of things were broken between Israel and Turkey. Now, when you took the trade, you basically took the oxygen out of the relations. So the relations, they're surviving on basically...
What are they surviving on? Why are they surviving at all? And in whose interest is it? Is it in Israel's interest? Is it in Turkey's interest? Is it in the Western allies, such as the United States' interest for them to have some sort of a relation?
I think yes, yes, and yes, in the sense that Turkey wants its relations with Israel because it knows this is also access to the Palestinians. If you break diplomatic relations, it's much more difficult for Turkey to access the Palestinian territories. That's one issue. Another issue is that Israel has been attacked by 7 fronts in this since October 7th. It doesn't need another front with Turkey. So I think Israel is also trying to keep the tensions in control. And of course, the U.S., we know many of the people in the Biden administration also served in the Obama administration, and they have had invested efforts into repairing relations between Israel and Turkey after the Mavi Marmara. They know that it's good to have Israel and Turkey in communication channels open, and that, for example, the fact that Turkey is, of course, a NATO member, but Israel has cooperation with NATO, but Turkey is now blocking this cooperation, which was beneficial to everybody. So I think also the U.S. knows that this is not something that is advisable, and so all these actors are I think they are trying to keep the tensions in a reasonable level.
Reasonable, but what is reasonable, right?
Yeah. It's very dangerous. Yeah, you're playing with fire, basically.
Absolutely, and the fact that these relations could really fall apart, it seems, at a moment's notice at this point because they've already been pushed to the edge. But let's talk about why Erdogan is doing this in the first place and the purpose of Turkey wanting to gain more international legitimacy, it seems, specifically in the region. It seems that Erdogan is trying to boost himself specifically in the Muslim majority countries, really going behind the Palestinian cause, trying to make themselves more of a name when it comes to the regional powers. So what's at play right here?
Yes, I think in all levels, Erdogan is very supportive of the Palestinians. First, the personal level, his upbringing, his education, his religious beliefs. This is all pushing him to a very clear direction. That's one element. Another element is the domestic scene in Turkey. Basically, Erdogan is now weaker politically. He needs more allies, also from the Islamist parties, the far Islamist parties. And they are pushing him to the extreme. They were the one who pushed him for the economic trade ban. It was basically domestic pressure that was saying, look, this is a hypocrite. He talks against Israel, but at the same time, he trades with Israel. He gives it what it needs for continuing the war effort. And I think this is something we also have to pay attention. And of course, the regional and the international level. Regionally, the Palestinian cause is something that is very emotionally charged. You can use it to boost your status in the Muslim world. And we know that Erdogan is a very popular leader among the Muslim publics. And of course, internationally, Erdogan thinks that Turkey does not get the place it deserves in the international system, that Turkey is a much more important country than the countries give it importance. And he thinks that they should pay attention to Turkey, they should treat it seriously. And in this respect, I think he he plays with this issue also to gain more importance in the international level.
And that's a difficult line for Turkey to be walking right now. On the one hand, panning to the Muslim Brotherhood, trying to gain support with the Palestinian cause and more legitimacy in the Middle East, but also trying to still maintain ties with NATO, maintain ties with Western allies as well. It's a very difficult line, it seems, for Turkey to be walking right now.
You're right. It's a delicate balance. But again, from Erdogan's perspective, basically the international system has moved from a unilateral system in which the US was very dominant to a multipolar system in which you cannot put all your eggs in one basket. You cannot only be dependent on NATO and the West. And the NATO and the West, if you look back in the Cold War, from Turkish perspectives, were not always the most reliable partners. And so you have to build bridges with Russia. You have to build bridges with China. You have to
build bridges with Egypt as well. This is another country that we saw the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, just visiting Ankara, I think, last week in the first meeting in 12 years between the two. And so this also shows that Erdogan trying to ease some of these ties, potentially also getting closer to Egypt, which is right there on the border with Gaza as well.
Yes, the war in Gaza has also been used for Turkey and Egypt to get closer, but this is a process that has begun already. Two years ago, we saw Erdogan and Sisi shake hands in the Mundial in Qatar. This is basically a process of still getting out of the Arab Spring. Okay. In the Arab Spring, Turkey did a few failed decisions. It was, of course, very supportive of Morsi, and then Sisi came, and it wanted to topple Assad, and Assad remained in power because of the Russian and Iranian intervention. So basically, all these wrong decisions made Turkey very isolated, both in the Middle East and in the Eastern Mediterranean. And many countries were very angry at Turkey on its position, especially on the Muslim Brotherhood, as you mentioned. And this, as I said, isolated Turkey. And Turkey worked to repair all these relationships. It started with the UAE, then Saudi Arabia, then Egypt, and now it's even moving to repair its relations with Syria.
And so by rebuilding these relationships, and we're talking about how Turkey wants a bigger say in the regional activities and also a bigger say in the Palestinian cause, specifically Gaza right now. As we said, since October 7th, Erdogan's stance against Israel has been very, very strong and an aggressive rhetoric at that. But at the same time, Turkey wants some sort of a say in the reconstruction of Gaza. And so is this by any way limiting exactly how strong Erdogan can be? Because you want to be aggressive towards Israel, yet at the end of the day, when the war is over, you want Israel to allow you to help rebuild Gaza in some way.
Yes, I think you're highlighting the paradox, that basically Erdogan broke all the trust with Israel. Because in the 2022 normalization, Erdogan was the one who approached Israel. It wasn't an Israeli initiative. It took time for Israel to build trust.
As Erdogan was trying to rebuild all of these ties, and all of the relationships.
Exactly. It was part of it. It was part of it. And basically Israel, especially also because of the trade ban, in which, again, Turkey went a step further than other countries. It did much more than other countries. And for what? I mean, so today Turkey doesn't sell the Israel cement, so Israel buys in Egypt cement. I mean, and so Turkey doesn't sell directly to Israel, so the Palestinians are selling. If the Palestinians are selling, why can't you sell? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of logic, at least, realpolitik considerations. So I think there's a paradox. Turkey wants to be more involved in the Israeli-Palestinian arena, but basically because of its approach to Israel, Israel is pushing it to the side. And I think despite this visit, that was a very successful visit of the Egyptian President Sisi in Egypt, I don't think Egypt is really interested in giving Turkey a role in Gaza. I think Egypt is happy being the chief mediator here. And also we see problems in Eastern Africa, steering, Ethiopia, Somalia. And Turkey is involved in mediating in this country, but Turkey also has a base in Somalia. Turkey is doing a lot of things in Somalia. So I think there is also suspicions between Turkey and Egypt will not give Turkey what it wants in Gaza. And hence, at the end of the day, you're right, it's sidelined. And Erdogan loves construction and would love to rebuild Gaza, and Gaza would need rebuilding. Of course, nobody denies that. But it would be anyhow hard for Israel to allow Turkish involvement here.
So what does the future then look like? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but it's difficult for Israel to build that trust again after Turkey has continued to deteriorate that trust. What could the future of the relationship look like between these two countries?
So the pessimists would say that the relations between Turkey and Israel have only gone downhill since Erdogan came to power. Yes, there were some points that things looked better, but basically you look at the trend, it's downhill, and as long as Erdogan is in power, nothing can improve. But others would say that despite all that has happened, we have now more than 75 years of relations.
And starting on a very strong note on that 75 years.
Yes, and even in this crisis, Israel and Turkey maintained diplomatic relations. Turkey did not downgrade even the diplomatic relations between Israel and Turkey. Actually, no Muslim-majority country downgraded its relations with Israel. So at the end of the day, these are two countries. Their economies are complementary. They're in a vicinity. They're in a very volatile region. Today's friend might be tomorrow's enemy. You don't know. So the optimists would say that at the end of the day, the reason these two actors cooperated during the Cold War can also explain why they will cooperate also further into the post-Cold War era.
Is there room for cooperation as long as Erdogan is still in power? Or when we're talking about the future of Israel-Turkey relations, does this have to be a post-Erdogan Israel-Turkey relation?
So if you want to be really pessimistic, you would say the problem is not only Erdogan.
Okay.
Because we have a big problem in Turkish society. Basically, most Turks have a negative view of Israel, a very negative view of Israel, of Zionism, of even of Jews. The anti-Semitism is also on the rise in Turkey. And it's not only a problem of Islamists, we also have a problem with the left in Turkey. And hence, to repair this, we would need more than just a change in the presidency in Turkey.
At this point right now, what is in Israel's best interest? How should Israel move forward with this? Because right now it seems like Turkey is making most of the decisions.
I think Israel has to be very pragmatic. It knows what it has on its plate. It knows that it's very difficult now to be an Israeli prime minister or any decision maker in Israel in the sense of the amount of threats and fronts you have to consider. And I think to maintain the tensions in low level is the best thing Israel can do. It has to, with all the problem with Erdogan's rhetoric, it cannot snipe back with rhetorical battles. It just makes things worse. And Israel has to focus its attention on its bigger threats.
Dr. Lindenstrauss, when we're talking about the Turkey-Israel relationship over the past half hour, we've been pretty broad. I want to go into more of a rapid-fire round, ask you some quick questions, and just get your quick initial reaction just to really give our viewers a sense of what you're thinking right now. So first, to wrap it all up, can Turkey truly be more of a friend or an enemy to Israel?
Turkey is a rival to Israel.
A rival, okay. What about the relationship between Israel and Turkey? Can it ever go back to pre-Erdogan days?
No.
Can you elaborate slightly?
No, in the end of the day, the golden era was actually the exception. And most periods, Israel-Turkish relations were not out in the air, they were not public. And there's a limit to where Turkish-Israeli relations could go.
Chances, in your opinion, of an actual military clash between Israel and Turkey? Even with Turkey being a NATO ally?
In the short term, low.
What about in the long term?
Long term, there's a lot of things we should still see.
We need another podcast episode for that? Okay.
That I would be less decisive in my answer.
As Turkey is trying to become more of a regional power, is it a stabilizing factor in the region?
No, unfortunately, Turkey used to be a status quo actor in the region. Now it's a revisionist actor, and I think that's part of the problems that Israel has with Turkey, because Israel, at the end of the day, is kind of happy in its borders, but Turkey today is not happy. It's a revisionist state. It thinks it doesn't get the international standing it deserves.
Has its actions since October 7th helped it gain more international credibility that it believes it deserves?
No, I think Turkey is seen as too extreme. I think it went, as I said, one step too far. It burned too many bridges. And the fact that it's so steadfast supportive of Hamas is not good for several actors, both regionally and internationally. It's okay to be pro-Palestinian, and it's okay to be sympathetic to the Palestinian suffering, which is completely understandable. But to be pro-Hamas, especially after Hamas did this genocidal act against Israel and so irresponsible towards its own population, I think that's where Turkey made a mistake.
right now, who has more to lose when it comes to the deterioration of ties, Israel or Turkey?
Well, I think Israel is as was in previous periods in the relationship, is the one that is more dependent than Turkey on Israel. But still, Israel is an important actor in the regional system, and it's better to have cooperative relations with Israel. As we see the UAE, Egypt, they're getting ahead because they have this cooperation with Israel. They criticize Israel, but they also manage to cooperate with it. And with Turkey, at the moment, it's only criticism. There's no constructive attitude coming out of Ankara.
And so how can that change then?
Well, because I think there is some understanding in Turkey that perhaps it's not constructive the way it handled the situation. I think there can be readjustment, can be some room to operate that will change some things. I think if it stops the trade ban, for example, that could be, it has to build Israel's trust again. And maybe through stopping the trade ban, which again, no other actor has done. So why are you doing it? I think that can rebuild some trust, rebuild some of the bridges that have been burned. Maybe that's a direction forward.
I hope we can possibly see that moving forward because, as you mentioned, it has been decades of a turbulent relation between Israel and Turkey. But Dr. Lindenstrauss, thank you for breaking down and giving us a little bit more insight into exactly how we got to where we are today.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Well, to all of our viewers listening at home, thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of the National Security Podcast right here on I24 News. Make sure to join us every week for more of these in-depth look at some of the most pressing security issues facing Israel today. On that note, I'm your host, Nicole Zedek, and thanks so much for listening.